All right. So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I'm Catherine Lemmer, Director of the Lake Forest Library. On behalf of the Library Board and the staff, welcome to this community listening session. We're so very pleased that you took the time to come tonight and to provide us with your thoughts and ideas about library services. As many of you know, the opportunity to restore, renovate, and expand the original 1931 building to enable it to serve future generations is a great honor and responsibility. It is an honor and responsibility that the library board and staff have taken very seriously over the last few years. So welcome. Before we get started, I'm just going to give you a few tech tips. So when you came in tonight, everybody was automatically muted. We're going to have a very short presentation by the library and then a little longer presentation by HGA, just to get everybody to the same place. You can add questions to the chat during the presentation and we'll respond to those at the end, or you can hold all your questions until the end of Victor's presentation, and then you can raise your hand using the reaction button, or you can physically raise your hand. And we will call on people. So I'm going to just ask tonight to just keep your time to a few minutes so that we can make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. All right, that's all the housekeeping duties. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about tonight was just about getting everybody to the same place. The library board's been working on this project for almost 5 years. It's a complex project. It's one of those that doesn't reduce itself down to small sound bites. And so we wanted to take a little time on the beginning to just talk to you about the work that's been done. Over the course of the last few years, we've looked at so many different options. We've reviewed them, we've analyzed them, we've made decisions. Once you make a decision, you know, the next decision follows on that. So we really wanted to just give everyone a chance to get caught up to where the library board is. And then sort of given the complexity of the project and all the passions surrounding library and the library building, what I've just come to notice is that there's a lot of misinformation out in the community. And it's really not surprising because it's a complicated project and it's hard to keep all the moving pieces together. So I wanted to make sure our time tonight was really valuable and productive. And so I thought I might just take a few minutes to talk about some fact versus fiction. And the reason I thought I wanted to do this is because, you know, people call me up, they email me, they come into the library and they're upset. Like they're visibly upset about something that they've heard that's going to happen to the building. And I just feel that's not a good place because our library is so important to our community. We love our library and we want everyone to know we're doing our very best with this project. And so usually people come in and we talk a little bit and they say, I've heard this. And I say, oh, really? Well, let me show you this. And then we do a tour of the building or whatever. And people get more comfortable with what's happening. So these are a couple of things I hear. You know, the original building's no longer going to be used for library services. The original front lawn is going to be plowed under and made into a driveway with parking. The original front entrance is going to be abandoned. And I just want to tell you that the 1931 building is incredibly important to our ability to deliver library services going forward. So we're going to take those historic spaces, we're going to refresh them, we're going to update them with technology, but they're going to be used. You will still be able to come to the front door, walk in that historic lobby, see the rotunda, and get service. There will be someone there to welcome you to the library. The goal would be to restore that front walk leading back up from the gates. And also one of the things that we've been talking about is to remove the east and west wings. Because when the building opened in 1931, the Tribune called those outdoor reading rooms. And if the wings do go away on the east and west side, it means we have that space back with this lovely historical feeling. So again, just reassuring you about the first one of the building is going to be used, right? The other thing I hear a lot is that the library is building the Marriott Courtyard suite of conference rooms in the library. I just want to tell people that's not happening. We're not building 5,000 square feet of meeting rooms. We're not going to add elegant event spaces. We're not adding a catering kitchen. We're not putting in a grand piano, and we're not building an auditorium. All of those are provided by other institutions in our community, and there's no reason for us to add them. If we wanted to use an auditorium, we need 300 people to come to a book event, which we've had in the last 3 or 4 years. We partner with Gorton and we make it happen over there. So please know that we're not doing that. What we do have right now is we have one large room that seats about 130, and we have one room that has a capacity of 12. What we'd like to do is in the large room, we'd like to expand it a little bit to 150, make it dividable so we can use it for 2 things at the same time, or make it into a smaller space when we need a smaller space. And we'd like to add sort of a wet sink and counter so that if we want to have a little coffee or pastry with breakfast or some children's program, there's very easy cleanup. And then with respect to both, we'd like to add some furniture storage and some very important hearing impairment support technology. Just very, growth orientated type things. The other thing is if there's space and budget, we would like to add 2 to 4 person study collaboration rooms. They're very common amenity in libraries. If you go to Deerfield, you see them. They have 5 or 6. Highland Park has some. Deerfield just went to increase their capacity from 3 to 18. Very desirable spaces. People use them to take exams. People use them for a quick interview for a caretaker, all kinds of simple things, as well as just collaboration spaces. The library is going to build a 20-foot square foot glass box on the north side. We would love 20,000 square feet, but it doesn't work on this site. So how we got to square footage is we added up all the things we do. We started that way. We added up all the things we do, all the things our community asks us to do, and we got to a square footage number. And then we took that number and we crunched it down and we said, this is what we can build on the site. So what we would like to talk about is increasing the library by 10,000 square feet. And of our total space then at 39,000, just to keep everybody having a little perspective, we need 8,400 square feet, almost 25% of the space, just 20% of the space just for our book collection. So we're an intense community with books. We like books. We like them. We use them. So where they're not going anywhere, and we just would like to have them accessible to people. Children like books at 3 feet, the height of 3 feet, so they can engage with them, use them, pick the ones they want to pick. Seniors like to be able to reach them because they're on 4 and 5 shelves instead of 8 and 9 in some of our cases. So we're still in very early design phase. Victor's going to talk all about that. So I won't talk about that now, but I reassure everyone that, this is a community project. We're talking to lots of people, as evidenced by tonight, and we're going to get there. But we all have a lot of passion, and so I think if we just keep those passions focused on the library and the library surfaces, we're all going to do great. We are talking about taking off the east and west wings. We've done some calculations around them, and it's more economical to take them off rather than to try and restore them or make them more well lit. And it really makes the historic preservation concept work. So when you take those off, the original building just pops. It just becomes all that it was meant to be. So again, just some facts versus fiction. And I encourage people to come and see me. I just don't like anyone unhappy about the library. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. We have all of this information on our website, the capital improvement project pages. There's an overview, space needs, budget. It's all there. And if you have questions, you can, there are boxes here to leave comments, ask for a tour, all kinds, send me a comment or ask me to call you and I'll do that. So just a couple of quick next steps. We're going to finish the listening sessions tomorrow night. We will be putting out a community survey. We can take everything we've learned over the last 5 days with these sessions, rework it into a survey, and then we will be presenting to City Council in May. They've asked us to come back and sort of with more detailed options, and so we'll be doing that. And that's all I have. So I'm going to turn it over to our architects, Victor Pachetti and Jane Dietering from HGA.
Thank you, Catherine. Just a quick audio visual check. Can everybody see a slide that says your library on it? And can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you for the nods and the thumbs up. Well, on behalf of the design team, again, welcome this evening. Really glad you can join us. We're finding that we're getting over 30 people for each of our listening sessions, which for those of us who facilitate community engagement is a really good turnout. So thank you for your engagement. Representing HGA this evening, on the line, we have Nick Janik, who's our trusty technologist, making sure our meeting goes off technologically without a hitch. TJ Bradley, who's helping record tonight's proceedings, and Jane Dietering, who's the principal in charge of the project and our national library planning and design expert. And I'm Victor Pachetti, architect for the project. We're going to start by some sharing. For those of you who may have come to a session before, thank you for listening to this again. Hopefully we're being consistent, but in the spirit of full transparency, our goal is to share about 3 years worth of progress of work that we have been supporting and serving the library on, to bring everybody up to speed on what has been done and perhaps just as importantly, what has not yet been done in terms of design. After I share that summary, Jane will share some thoughts, ideas, and trends in library programming and services that we're seeing in our work nationwide these days. You'll see some imagery from projects. It has been noted that some of the imagery is fairly modern. The intent is not to show spaces that would or would not be appropriate for Lake Forest, but to help sponsor discussion about library programming, plant a seed for discussion of things that you all might want to see in terms of services and programs in a Lake Forest library. So we'll go through some of that. And then we'll stop talking and hope for lots of questions and comments. The only comment that we're nervous about is not having any comments at all. And so we're really encouraging the group to converse, pepper us with questions and your thoughts in the listening session. So the slide I'm sharing with you goes back to 2018. The library board commissioned HGA to begin the process with a comprehensive feasibility study of the building and what might be possible. The images that you're seeing are just simply cover pages for 8 different chapters that make up this approximately 100-page report. HGA has a specialty in historic preservation and historical architecture led by our historian, Ginny Lakovic. Ginny completed the first 3 chapters of the book that included a full developmental history, the historic trajectory of the project from its inception, initial funding, through the years of its development to the present. The physical description describes in detail the architectural style or styles of the building, beginning with Edwin Clark and talking about some of the different alterations and changes and growth that has happened over time. There was a condition assessment. If one were to go to that chapter, you'll see many photographs and descriptions of each cracked piece of stone and brick separating and leakage and other elements that would need to be addressed in order to fully restore the building to its historic grandeur. Did you all hear that beeping? Good. Sorry, I had an emergency alert on my phone. My apologies. Okay, back to the program. Our engineers also did a thorough walkthrough of the building. That's the chapter called Engineering Assessment. Our folks went through all the electrical systems, mechanical systems, structural. If you can see the center photograph, that's taken above the plaster dome underneath the exterior dome to assess points of structural issues and leakage in that area. Treatment recommendations are based on the U.S. Department of Interior Historic Preservation Guidelines. So the report made recommendations of how to treat and restore and preserve the historical environments inside and outside the building. And then the chapter called Design Studies. The Design Studies chapter was really where the team identified the full spectrum of how the existing library could be improved, repaired, and expanded. You're seeing images of 6 different alternatives. The wrench in the upper left indicates the repair option. What if we just fix what's broken? In the architecture, the historic surfaces, mechanical, electrical, it's a repair project. Bookended on the lower right by what if there is a brand new facility constructed on a different site. The 4 options that were focused on in between those 2 bookends were different measures of how to improve, renovate, and or expand the current library on site. Following that feasibility study, the library commissioned a national library programming expert, Penelope Hummel. Penny worked with the library staff and director, Catherine, and the board in a lot of detail, assessing things in the existing building, such as lineal foot of shelving, number of volumes, furniture, and comparing that to program needs and improvements moving forward. A specific to connect to Catherine's introduction, if children's shelving is not as tall and lowered to be accessible and more inviting for kids and allow parents to see over it, that would take up additional square footage than leaving shelving in a children's department 6 or 7 feet tall. Penelope's program went through 5 different iterations. Library staff prioritized programs to match with what could be accommodated in an addition on the existing library site. This is the document that took the program to that 10,000 square foot increase that Catherine had summarized, from the existing building at approximately 29,000 square feet to the existing building and an addition that would total approximately 39,000 square feet. The process then moved to a closer analysis of the project site. As many of you know, it's a constrained site. In the image on the left-hand side, you see a small green box. That's an area that's not currently part of the library site, but would be conveyed to the library as a result of some of the development happening to the north. Even a small site increase such as that is helpful in order to accommodate better vehicular circulation on the site and free up a little bit of space for expansion. In the image on the right, The outline at the upper part of the slide indicates the buildable area that avails itself for a new addition to the library. It doesn't necessarily imply that that's where an addition would be built or how it would be built, but it does outline the limited area available to expand the library. Any expansion that will be considered would be on the north side, furthest away from that prominent historic facade. And adding to something Catherine mentioned, on this diagram, you can see the wings that were added in the 1970s, where one alternative is to remove those wings, add that space to a new expansion, and really restore the historic integrity of that primary south facade of the building. This page illustrates 11 different design studies that have been explored to date. This is important to note because one of these 11 happens to be a study of a minimal modern glass box as an addition to the north. This is an element that understandably has created a lot of concern, a lot of discussions out in the community. However, the glass box option was one of 3 design options presented at one particular library board meeting. At that meeting, the library board determined that that would not be a viable direction to go, that it was too far afield in its dialogue with the historic building. But nonetheless, that particular option has been out in the community, and it's our opportunity this evening to say that there is not a design for this library project. Each of these alternatives represents a study of building shape, mass, material of what may be possible on the project site. However, a design process for a project prior to City Council review, Historic Preservation Committee review, that process has not yet begun. We continue to be in a pre-design phase. I will call your attention to the 2 images at the very bottom of the slide. These 2 images were created in preparation to meet with an advisory group specifically to discuss historic preservation. At the request of the library, the city helped assemble an advisory committee comprised of representatives from the Preservation Foundation and the HPC to present some initial studies to receive feedback on what kind of connection and historical architecture would best pair with the existing historic building. The feedback received was critical, to be sure. There were 2 meetings and 2 iterations that were informative for the library and the design team to better understand the parameters that will guide the historic nature of a future design. So that information has been captured and will be the genesis of a design process when a project moves forward. There has been some interior imagery that has been produced. The 2 images at the top illustrate historic spaces where there would be no change proposed other than restorative, to repair surfaces that it may have been damaged by leakage, to remove what we've been calling clutter, photocopiers and storage out of historic spaces, and restoring those to becoming welcoming foyers and reading rooms as had been originally intended. There have been some illustrations of what could be new spaces. Those have received some critique, such as there's too much open floor space, it's not efficient. Even these images are not even based on a floor plan at this juncture. They're merely produced to illustrate ideas and concepts that the library hopes to achieve in a renovation expansion project. For example, some of these images showed the proximity of an elevator to an entrance. to speak to the need for greater accessibility for folks with disabilities, parents with strollers, that would be an important principle in a new building. Bringing daylight through an open stair to lower levels that right now have no daylight. That's a concept or a goal for a building. These imageries do not imply a design that is in any way complete or even begun, but try and illustrate goals for how programs might look and feel and serve the community. So that takes you to the present, to this series of listening sessions to the community in preparation for going back to City Council and sharing our findings. I want to turn it over to Jane now, who's going to take us through some of these library programs, trends, and considerations that could find a home in the Lake Forest Library.
Thank you, Victor. Hi, I'm Jane Dietering, library specialist with HGA. And as much as we've been now previously talking about the exterior, the site, the respect that an addition has for what's existing, we want to now go to the personal connection that the library has with the people of the community. The library experience is something that is very personal to each individual. It's about the emotional connection that we have with a place that we either went to as a child or a place that you take your children or your grandchildren. And so really thinking about that human experience for everyone who uses the library is really an important part in shaping the spaces that are inside the library. And so even as we talk about this at a very programmatic stage, as Victor said, when we're counting things, how many books, how many tables, we're still thinking about how that will in the future shape and inform that personal experience. So let's go inside. One of the terms that we've used during the planning and programming process is a term called marketplace. Now I understand that that term has caused some confusion, and it's really a term that evolved out of what we would call about 10, 15 years ago, when people said, why can't I pick up my own holds or my reserves? Or once people started to see a self-check, they said, you know what, I need this little transactional area of the library where I can make a copy and I can pick up my holds. And so it became this retail thought behind some aspects of library design. What's important to know in a marketplace is it represents something like this, where you think about when you first walk into the library, does it draw you in? Do you understand that? Do you have a sight line that says, oh, I know where I can go? For instance, it's so important, much like you have now, to always have a person there at a service desk that can help you. So again, knowing that there's always someone there to help. Maybe there's a bench where you can wait for someone, or if it's been a long walk from the parking lot, you can sit down and take a rest. In that marketplace area, there's usually some pretty wide open sight lines so that you can see beyond. There's the self-checks that you see here. This was a historic department store that we renovated into a library. And this is still about respecting the history that was there, the terrazzo floors, the plaster capitals, but adding those new services of this marketplace, meaning open reserves and self-checks. These are very different libraries, but again, have very similar functions that are shrouded in the building that each one was given. Now, this is a very different building. This building, I want to call to your attention the comment about an open space. Near the entry in these places, whether we call them a marketplace or whatever, these spaces are very important that they're open, because those open spaces allow for easy changeable displays. It allows for, again, someone to return their books. Here on the left, we have an auto sort machine. Around the corner are the reserves. So again, you pick up your own holds, and that's very convenient. There's a person right in front to offer assistance. There's a corridor right in front of you in this case, so that children can just run through that first floor directly to their very own special experience. And it keeps the noise in that particular dedicated space. And most importantly, there's also a stair that immediately is visible so that people know, oh, I need to go to the second floor. That's where I can go. So it's an ease of wayfinding and a way for anyone who has been there many times or been there for just the first time to really get oriented to the space. Something that's important to know about libraries is that when you have a library that's heavily used like yours is, you can expect to see an increase, a sustained increase of use of 30% over the usage that you currently have now. Now, if this was a brand new library that was being built after having very poor usage, you could expect to see a sustained increase of 50% more people than you have today. But in this library, your library, if 30% is going to suggest we need a little bit more space at the entry as you have a lot of people coming and going and strollers. So again, we're trying to accommodate all those different people and uses and making it very convenient. When we think about the special spaces, we think about children's. And again, thinking about how the children's spaces have changed a lot since when your building was built. Now these again are very different buildings. These were designed for very different communities with different visions of what their library is. As Victor said, none of these would in any way be appropriate for Lake Forest. So although we're showing you spaces, please understand these are not things we would suggest for Lake Forest. But look at how different this children's area is than the children's area that you have in your current building. This is daylit. There's play space. What people have learned now is that it's very understandable that children learn through play and through doing, and those are the first steps of learning to read. There really isn't much space in your existing library for that to happen. The children also like browser books, face out books that they can browse through and get engaged in the actual collection, make some of their own selections. And those things only happen if you can display books in a different way than densely packed on a shelf. So looking at interactive play spaces, and in this case, with nearby program rooms, much like the Casian room, you can see the big open doors that open up so that the children can use that space when there's a program or when there's no program. Others can use that meeting room or program room. It's very important that we, from a real estate point of view, are using your building to its utmost potential and thinking about how children will use that space through the interaction of color and child-sized spaces. Here are some of those browsers that I talked about, how children can easily flip through those books and find the cover that seems like the book that they want to take home. It's about discovery for children at a very early age and a little more space. Here again, there's spaces that are intimate, small spaces, tables that children can feel comfortable just quietly playing or reading on their own. For all of these different experiences to happen in one building or in one children's area, you need a little more space for things to spread out than what you currently have. The next space that was probably not even envisioned when your library was built was the importance of teens and young adults. As you have a teen area now and you have a growing usage of your young adults, what you're going to see is a lot more dedicated space to children in this elementary and early high school ages. We have dedicated young adult computers, so they're not necessarily using the adult computers. And what we usually have is some enclosed space because we know young adults are active and noisy, but we also know that in school, they are now working in teams. They're learning in teams and they have group projects. And so as the cursor was just indicating, those collaborative spaces along the edge of the library are used for children's collaborative programs. They can be used with technology. They can be used for just a quiet study space for an individual. So those are very versatile rooms that you're going to see distributed through many of our libraries. But again, it supports how children and teens are learning today. We also have wide open flexible spaces so that they can have large groups or small groups, all dedicated to very flexible functions that happen in the young adult collection areas. And here, what's important here is that hexagon patterned wall. What's important is that you're going to see a lot of glass that in these images on the interior of the spaces. It's very important for safety and security that staff have a very good sight line into all the enclosed rooms. So study and collaboration rooms have glass. Here's a sight line into the young adult area so that they have that sense of privacy and enclosure, but at all times we can absolutely see and supervise what's happening inside those rooms. And this is not to suggest that you are going to have a band in your Lake Forest library, but what this represents is imagination. It represents the connection that this local little band had with their local library. And although they had a studio space they could have recorded it in, they chose to use the stair. So it's thinking about your library and the uses that could happen in the library based on imagination that people have and how much they want to be there. So again, we want to create it as a flexible space so that all these things can happen if that's what's right for your community. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about youth. Let's think about the adults. What we know so far about the adults in Lake Forest is that you have a beautiful quiet reading room and that you have an amazing art collection and a business collection and Audubon prints. And these are all the things that are important to Lake Forest and important to your building. And these are not things we would dream of changing. But most libraries don't have such beautiful character in their buildings, but many libraries still treasure that fireplace. So here's a much different library. And what's important is, again, that idea of low shelving for children. You can see over the shelves to that yellow box in the corner, which happens to be their intimate little children's space. We have a library fireplace that's the hearth at the center of the library, and it's surrounded again by tables and seating and those, again, collaboration type spaces, those enclosed rooms that adults use as well. You can see those over on the right with the red wall. If we look at the next image, a very different entry space, again, an adult collection where there's integrated art, there's geography to, again, help people of the world understand where they came from and where they are in the world. And in this particular library, it was very important that they have a large family table or a large neighborhood table. So someone could come and spread out their newspaper and sit alone. And much like many restaurants, someone might come and sit with them that they don't know and strike up a conversation. So again, I'm not suggesting that that table would be appropriate for Lake Forest, but it's appropriate for some. And you can see how diverse these uses can be. The next image is a library some of you may have been to. It's Lake Forest, or excuse me, it's not Lake Forest. It's Egg Harbor up in Door County. And Door County wanted a very much of a community center with a small library. You can imagine during the winter months, it's not used much, but the importance of a community center is huge. So we really, again, focused on creating a hearth, a place that people can come and gather and read and talk with their neighbors, and yet be surrounded by books and daylight. Again, creating those daylight spaces. And again, think of this, you can pull an extra chair up to that conversation at any time. So it's about flexibility. These are all very different personalities in these buildings based on what's important to the community. The next slide is about those program rooms, technologies, and creative spaces. The program rooms, as Victor mentioned, are rooms that are very important to library services today. This is, again, an image of that historic department store. And what's important here is that when you think about a historic department store, you think about those display windows in the front. Well, this is a commercial district. And so we wanted to make sure that we were respectful of those display windows. But now we wanted to put library services and people on display. So again, we have a big door to open up that space, in essence, to say, please welcome people in, use this space when it's not being used for a library program. Again, here you can see their quiet computers, a very different type of program space. This is a program space, again, directly adjacent to that children's area with the operable sliding doors. But what's important here is this represents a small cleanup sink where again, that little alcove can serve to clean up messy programs. It serves to support coffee and pastries, but it's in no way elaborate. It just supports the immediate library program functions of that simple program room. When we think about computers, we also think about the fact that sometimes after a lot of focus, you need to stretch your eyes, you need to refocus your concentration. So having a computer area that's quiet and dappled with light is a really restful way to do the type of computer work that requires a lot of focus. But we also recognize that not all computers are quiet today. Think about sometimes you have to be online and you have to be on the phone talking to customer service. So sometimes there are conversations that have to happen while you're on the computers. And in that case, we have a completely separate computer area for what we call, social or conversational computers versus things like this that are very quiet. Again, what's important about computers is that they're close to the desk. And right now, we know you have a large reference room with a lot of computers, and they're close to the desk, just as we would recommend, but they're not very flexible. So again, it's creating that flexibility to be able to update technology is something that we would want to incorporate in a new library. And again, here you can get that sense of connection through the building, ease of wayfinding, and daylight. And also, we think a lot about maker spaces or studio spaces, but those really the essence of those rooms is about creativity. So here's a space where it was about technology creation, writing code, and sharing with programmers. What's important is that we think about all of us like to learn around doing. It's not just children or teens. It's not just recording studios and 3D printers. It's about sharing activities and interests across ages. It's across cultures. It's across different language and educational levels. Everyone can enjoy doing something with someone else. And so it's creating those program spaces for those services and library programs to happen. And it's about those collaborative spaces. As we talked about, these collaborative rooms that you see along the back here, yes, they're adjacent to technology. Some have their own, some require you bring your own, and some are really surrounding about a book, but they're easily supervisable and they're very, very in high demand across all of our libraries. Again, you can see they're in very different sizes, whether they're 2 or 4 person or an 8 to 10 person over on the left. We have a book club room on the right. Again, you get a sense that they're very easy to supervise, but they're also very, very important to all the community groups or students that are using them, grad students, Zoom calls with grandchildren. They're very, very important spaces. So again, creating that diverse type of space is very important. This particular library was considered the living room of the community. And while they wanted this living room area to be social, those quiet rooms now are over off on the left. So regardless of the balance, if you have a quiet library and conversational rooms, or you have a social library and quiet rooms, there's always a place for both of those experiences to coexist at the same time. And it's important they do, because one day you might want a social experience and the next day you want to be left alone and be quiet. We want you to come back again and again because the library has the spaces you need. Here's another library, completely different, where there aren't separate rooms, but there's a room where you can do these things. You can see in the middle, there's a table where people are working together and people are working individually, all at the same big table. There's also a table over on the right where there's technology and other people there, and they're just working on technology. It's not separate rooms, it's in the same room. So this whole space, again, remains very flexible for now, but also over the course of the building, whether it's 10, 20, or 30 years. It's a very flexible space. Most importantly, again, it has to be memorable. It has to be designed specifically to Lake Forest. So it's about the details of your community and reflecting that. Here in this library, yes, the word library is an icon that signifies the entry into the library, but when you get up close, there's more detail. There's more detail because the words are made out of the names of authors specific to this community, and the brick pattern isn't just a brick pattern, it's representative of the spines of the book. So whether people realize it or not, it's a level of detail and care that goes into the design of these buildings that, again, makes it special to these communities. We've talked a lot about windows and daylight. What's important is that it's important for people to see in to what's happening at the library, because libraries have changed a lot, but it's also important for those people in the library to see out, to rest their eyes, to take advantage of the views, to just enjoy the daylight. And again, so it's about the details, whether it's shelving, whether it's graphics, whether it's simple signage, wanting to make sure that the wayfinding is very clear, that people feel that there's an experience and a place for them. And again, that they have that personalized concierge service that we know is very important to Lake Forest. That has to be very respected in the design of this new building and in how this library would function moving forward. So with that said, we've told you a lot about how other people are doing things. Now we really want to hear more about what's important to you, the community of Lake Forest, how you use the library, what you'd like to see in this library that doesn't happen here. We have 4 questions that we're going to review with you, and we'd like you to answer. But as Victor said, more importantly, we want you to share whatever it is you came here to share with us. We want to get your comments, because that is what's going to be important to shaping this next design process. So also, again, just a quick reminder of how we're going to engage with you. Again, there's the chat function on the bottom. You're going to notice you may certainly write questions in the chat if you'd like. Victor's going to be monitoring the chat, as is Nick. There's the chat. We also have a reaction tool that starts to show how you can raise your hand electronically if you'd like. You could clap if you like somebody's comments. And most importantly, if you just want to raise your real hand and let us know that you're interested in making a comment, believe me, that works. We're happy to just have you interact in any way. So the first question, we're going to talk, we'll run through the first 4. You can decide if you'd like to answer any of those, and then we just want your comments. So the first question is, imagine the new library that Lake Forest deserves. In this case, it's a renovation. So that's how we're still referring to new, but it's a renovation of that Lake Forest deserves. What does this library offer? And how does this library enrich lives? Next question. What current library services, collections, programs, and areas do you use most? Which do you enjoy most? But maybe what's missing? Next, what makes you feel welcome at the library? This is really important. What makes you feel welcome? What might improve your library experience? And most also importantly is, can you access everything you're looking for at the library? And our 4th question is, in addition to books, and we know we're going to treasure those books, how can the library best support you in lifelong learning, including access to new technologies? So with that, now you understand the questions, the type of questions. So the first question is about imagining the new library that Lake Forest deserves. What does it offer? And how does it enrich lives? Anyone feel like you have some thoughts about what this library means to you and how it enriches your life, or your family's life, or your friends? Any comments? What about any of your friends? When you talk to people about what the library means to them, are there things about the library that you want to make sure we don't change? We have a comment in the chat. Of course, you may make a general comment.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's welcome.
I'm trying to make dinner and do all kinds of things here. But I just wanted to give general input. First of all, I applaud all of the work you have done in with respect to the internal spaces for the library. I totally agree that the children's area should be expanded. It should have more light. All the things that you're looking at are just wonderful. But there's been a lot of concern in our community with respect to the exterior of the addition. And I think that's where, at least I have heard, that is where most of the concern is focused. Because like many people, I believe the library is the most beautiful building in Lake Forest. I think the historic significance is something that we have to respect. And I think what got people very upset was to see some of the drawings where the addition did not seem to be in keeping with the original architecture. And I know this to be true because I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I know you're aware that there are drawings that are being talked about in our community from James Sheeran, that those drawings look very similar to the current building. And because of that, I feel like I've had so many people comment saying, that's exactly what we need. That's what we need. Something that doesn't even look like an addition, but looks like the beautiful building that we currently have. So I guess I say, have at it and do a wonderful job with all the internal, improvements you want to make. But I think what the community has been concerned with is the exterior impact. And I think that's where if you use, and I know you don't use someone else's drawings, but if you look at those James Sheeran drawings, I have heard from so many people that that would be their preference if we could do something that is in keeping with the current beauty of the building. So anyway, thank you. I do appreciate all the work that you've put into this.
Thank you.
And thanks for breaking the ice. We've done a number of these listening sessions, and we do find that Judy always needs somebody to break the ice to get the conversation going. So thank you for that.
We have Patricia. I see your hand raised. Thank you very much. Can you unmute yourself? Do you know where your mute button is? We can't quite hear you.
So I agree with the first speaker. We would like, I've only lived here 45 years. People have lived here much longer than I have. We would like a seamless addition. It doesn't look like an addition. It looks like the original by Edwin Clark. And the projections that I have seen presented by the library look like additions, and they don't relate to the original structure, majestic structure at all. That is a huge disappointment because it detracts from the majestic stature of the original building. And the streetscape is being damaged by having the reestablishment of the walk from the street to the building is wonderful. But having parking in front of the building is not wonderful. Changing the front door, which is beautiful, making it somewhere else in the front is not beautiful. You're making it very contemporary, and you're ignoring the historic character, which is the mission of the city of Lake Forest and its residents. That's why we moved to Lake Forest. So I think you have to think of the mentality of the people who live here and why they came here. They don't want to see the majestic structure having a distraction of an addition. They would like a seamless addition that seems part of the original structure. So I agree with the original speaker 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And I see a hand raised from Chris and Erica. Go ahead, please.
Hi there. I think in terms of what the library offers, it's important that the library offerings complement, not overlap with the offerings of other cultural institutions in Lake Forest, the Gortons, the Ragdales, the Ellawas, the Parks and Rec of the city. And I think kind of the obvious place would be to focus on it being a place of, geared towards students and learning and education. I think, involving students at the college to see how the library might complement what the college has on campus. Obviously, the different schools in the community. But, I think, the kind of it being the living room of of the city. I think there are a lot of other living rooms, or maybe some studies and some living rooms and some family rooms. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as one considers the offerings.
Thank you.
Chris.
Appreciate the comment. I'll catch us up a little bit on what's been happening in the chat to make sure we stay current there. Here we go. Chusri says, I believe that when a person first comes to the Lake Forest Library, they are wowed by the interior of the rotunda. And from Courtney Hoffman, love the idea of meeting rooms. I have used them many times at other libraries for tutoring. Kids use them for group space, so needed. Tech space is also a great idea. Lots of fun tools the general house might not have. I feel like our library is beautiful, but a little behind many others in the newer technology. Then from Roberta Miller, agree we need the historic significance and understanding gently brought into today's world. And then from David Rose, the exterior design work has not started. We are not starting it until we have alignment on the project parameters such as space, location, etc. It is fiscally prudent to follow this process. The design work we engaged with HGA to produce was intended to provide us a range of options so we could understand what the boundaries were. Budget seems to be a big issue for the community. We are trying to keep costs top of mind since we know Lake Forest has a history of being fiscally prudent. We appreciate and hear your concerns around the exterior. Since we have not started this yet, I'm afraid you are reacting to a clamor being created on social media that is not based on reality. Please come back and share your input when we do start the exterior design process. We appreciate your enthusiasm. We understand your concerns, and I'm certain HGA will not disappoint. And that catches us up on the chat. Other questions and comments, please.
It looks like Thea has a comment in the chat as well.
All right, yes, new arrival of a chat comment. Hi, I once attended this library or used this library as a study space, and that was great. These past couple of years, I have used libraries for 1, the volunteer fair, and 2, 3D printing. On the topic of the volunteer fair, it was difficult to navigate through this Lake Forest building to get to and see all of the booths. I felt perhaps that Gorton would have been a better venue than the current library floor plan. On the topic of 3D printing, I have had to drive to a different library that has this service. I would like to see a makerspace with technology like 3D printers and laser printers. And from Natalie, I love the rotunda. My favorite part of the library experience is to have business in the rotunda. Do we need a new marketplace since the current rotunda seems to work well? A new marketplace would make the current entrance obsolete.
Right.
A hand raised from Emmy Neal. Thank you, Emmy. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm Emmy Neal. I have lived in Lake Forest for 29 years, in fact. And I was just going to say that one of the things I always appreciated about the library growing up in town was the wide selection, right? The large shelf space we have for our library books, and also that it is one of the few places in town, the rec center really being the other one, where kids and teens can come and hang out without buying anything. I know their schools tend to shuffle them right out the door for supervision reasons, and the library is one of the few places where I was able to go when I was in school. So yeah, that is part of what does it offer. It is a place to be. So
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Okay, a new one in the chat from Thea. The other library I used had a drive-through pickup window. This was so handy during these unusual times. Please consider a drive-through window. Thank you for taking our input. And just a quick parenthetical, a drive-through has in fact been part of the planning, in particular consideration of the site from the beginning. So point well taken, and that's certainly been part of the planning as we move forward. I'll add a question for the group that really tackles this notion of the historic character of the library. Clearly, that's been a topic of tremendous sensitivity in the community. The design work that has been done, it can't be overstated, has been only exploratory in nature to draw out of the library board some design preferences. And the most literal design work was done specifically to solicit reaction and input from the Preservation Foundation and the HPC. To some degree, clearly that's backfired. In an effort to get feedback from folks who are the stewards of the historic nature of the building, it has caused concern in the community. The question for the group, or seeking of advice, how can this process better communicate that a building addition has not been designed and it will be designed through the process of Preservation Foundation and HPC, and it is the library's commitment to do that in a way that the community is comfortable with and will be endorsed. Nothing has been designed, but there is a feeling in the community that it has and that it's not historically sensitive. How can we all work together to clear up that misconception and assure that historic preservation will be at the forefront? What's your advice? Okay, we'll let that one percolate there for a little bit, and I'll go on to more items in the chat. From David Rose, can you tell us more about meeting rooms? Where will they be? Who will use them? Which other libraries have them around us?
You want me to take that one, Victor?
Please do.
Sure. So, and I think one of my colleagues, Ed Finn, may be on as well. So as I said, when I started with the little facts versus fiction, the small collaboration rooms, the 2 to 4 person rooms, they're in most of our neighboring libraries. libraries, even small libraries like Glencoe are investigating how to shoehorn them in because there's such a demand for them. And the kinds of things they get used for is a very long list. So people use them when they have to do a group project in school or college. We've seen some requests for spaces from people who want to interview a caretaker and they don't want to invite that person into their house. We've had nannies interviewed. We've had nannies asked to use rooms so they can interview the families because they don't feel comfortable going into someone's home. So these are very safe public spaces. We have people who want to meet with, we've had estate planners, we've had all of these individuals who just need a one-off room. And then we have people who they're taking an online course and they need to listen to a lecture or they need to sit for an exam. We've had students ask for spaces to study for the SAT. They're small, they're enclosed, they make you focus. So the list of what the rooms would be used for is almost endless. Are we saying that we would put a bank of 100? No, but I think given the size of our community, if we matched what communities with similar populations have, we would be on the right track. So Deerfield has population about 18,000. They have 5. We would like a small meeting room because we tend to use our first floor room, which has some elegant wood paneling and all of that, which used to be an office, and we've repurposed that into a small book discussion room. So we'd like a small meeting room of 8 to 12 persons. So even if we have a library staff meeting, we'd like to have that. I mean, we're not looking to book it every on every half hour of the day. But I think there is an interest. Sometimes we've gotten asked for subcommittees of the Women's League of Voters. They just need a place to meet for a half hour on something. Our Friends group has many meetings. So those are all, I think, just very casual uses that people are looking for spaces to have. And they come,
Thanks,
they have
Catherine.
technology, as Jane said, sometimes they have technology in them. Sometimes you bring your own technology. Sometimes it's universal technology, but it's all done in a way that if in 5 years from now, nobody uses those kinds of rooms, the space can be flexed out to something else.
And catching us up on the chat, I think Christina Corsiglia might be offering some input to the question of what advice do you have for the team in helping realign some of the misunderstanding in the community. It says, take the drawing off the library's website. It gives the impression that it is the proposed drawing, and so I think it's a point well taken that in the spirit of transparency, it might not offer the context for everybody of what those design studies were. So thank you for that. Thea says, FYI, your voice cut out when reviewing my feedback on the volunteer fair. That said, all of this is available for reading, so no worries. I think Thea's feedback on attending the volunteer fair had to do with challenging wayfinding to access the booths for that particular function. And then from David Rose, Kathy Cerniak has mentioned the idea of a charrette. How would that work for you as an architectural firm? And how would the community and project benefit from this kind of a design exercise? For those who might not be familiar, the term charrette refers to an interactive group or communal way of designing. This is something that our team has done often, usually in a physical setting, but we're learning how to do it virtually during COVID. A charrette format means that a number of sketchy preliminary design ideas are brought forward in a forum like this for a group or community review, during which we might sketch live or bring models if this is an in-person event to make a very interactive design dialogue occur with a community. That's a process that we do often and are open to as designers. And we find that the interaction in real-time design helps include everybody's feedback and actually hopes to build ambassadors for the project. So a design charrette as recommended by the city could be a great tool to move a process forward once design begins. Thea says, love the idea of small meeting rooms. I use such things at a library in Michigan. And from Rami Lopat, to answer your question, this might be about the historic nature of the library. Last August, you presented option A, a classical design, and option B, a conversation across time. The library board recommended design option B to further conversation with the community and stakeholders. Could you show us option A, what you consider classical? In my opinion, that's when what HGA considers classical and what the community considers classical got seriously off track. Yeah, thank you for that comment, Rami. When we presented the option to the advisory committee of the HPC, it was noted to us that that option that was considered traditional is still not in keeping with what the expectations would be from the Preservation Foundation and the HPC in Lake Forest. What I can say to that is our office does work that is to be compliant with the Department of Interior Historic Preservation guidelines across the nation. And it's fair to say that the various historic preservation commissions that we collaborate with interpret those guidelines in many different ways, which leads to different types of renovations and different types of additions. We have gone through and are going through the learning curve of the interpretation of those historical guidelines that are unique to Lake Forest. And so the note is spot on that neither of the two options shared with the advisory committee cut muster in what will be expected in Lake Forest. And that feedback has been understood and will certainly inform design options going forward when that process begins. Other comments and questions, please. Let's keep the conversation going.
We talked a little bit about what some people would like to see at the library, meaning support of the tutoring rooms or a drive-up book drop or pickup window. Are there other things that you think would be really beneficial to add to the library or things that you've used elsewhere? I think those are really great ideas.
Not important. Not important. The important thing is to have a seamless, beautiful architectural building that is compatible with the original structure. And I think that speaks for what all the people, especially Romney, has said in the past. That's so important. And you're from the East. You should know how important it is to have this continuity of historical integrity of our architecture. That is so underestimated, I think, by the library board, even though they're residents of Lake Forest. As an Easterner, I'm particularly appalled by developers who want to change the character of the town. And by making an addition that is purely an addition, not seamless, is unacceptable to most of us. I'm sorry I'm so vehement, but the library is purity, and we should keep it that way.
One of the things, actually several of the things we were also hoping to discuss in this forum is how the library provides services and programs that serve the community, every member, every demographic. Does anybody have anything they would like to share in terms of what services are working that ought to be amplified, or library programming and services where you see a need in the way that the library could provide programming and services to the community? Are there any comments or thoughts to share in regards to the functioning of how a library delivers services outside of the container within which these services occur? Our technologist, Nick, is just reminding folks that by default, your Zoom is muted. So if you do want to give a shout out, please remember to unmute. Anybody is free to unmute at any time. Sarah, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead. Thanks for sharing.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I used to be on the Gorton Community Center board, and I was involved with the renovation of the space there and in the past, and interpreting what the building should be used for, helping with some of the design of the spaces. We have a community area as you come into the building that we designed and decorated to facilitate people to gather informally, formally, for different purposes, to create community. And in that respect, I'm aware that there are a lot of other buildings and other services in the community that can facilitate meetings and gathering spaces, such as the Sweet Escape space at the Gorton Center that Kate Holland is involved with starting, the Life Working Co-working shared office space that's in town. And I'm curious what your process has been in terms of working together with those entities to see what their experience has been with attracting people and finding out what the demand for those services are. So it's more of a process question.
Yeah, I'm going to defer that question to Catherine. I know there's been substantive discussion with partner organizations throughout the community. And so, Catherine, can I turn to you to share some of that process?
We did a couple of things. So first of all, back in 2017, we did a community survey, an initial community survey that asked people what they wanted their library to do. From that, we did the two-year strategic plan, because that survey specifically directed many changes in what we were hearing from the community, as far as even to the times of when story times were offered, what people wanted to see in those story times, what people wanted to, what residents wanted to see as far as opportunities for adults to come to the library and engage with other individuals, whether it was a book discussion or a tech class. So we started there. We then started reaching out. We partner with Gorton, we partner with LOA. I think if you go on our website, we have a list of almost 50 partners. Our location is such that, we drive some business into the central business area. So we partner with many of those businesses. Over the years, we've had specific programs. The reality is that people in this community, we answer lots of phone calls asking for space to be used. So, we understand that you can, if you are in the 5th, 6th, or 7th, or 8th grade, you may be able to take a technology class at school, but you may not be able to get into that technology class, or it moves at a pace that doesn't work for you. That's what we find with a lot of our seniors, is the classes that are offered by places like Life Working, they're too big in scope, and they move too fast, and there's too many people in the class. And so we've been able to we work sometimes with Dickinson Hall. Sometimes we offer them there. Sometimes we offer them here. But they're really, short, easily digestible tech classes. We do, which, there seems to be a gap. We've actually made a big grid about what everyone else is offering in the community and what we're offering and how we offer it, to make sure that we're not competing, because competition doesn't make the situation better. I think what happens is when we do things, when we partner with the History Center, and we all, the History Center led this initiative to write an NEH grant. And we were, we as a library, were so excited to be able to participate in that. And so I think, rather than talking about us all trying to get a bigger piece of the same pie, as this community, I'd like to suggest that what we do is talk about increasing the pie. We had Alderman Karas come up with that fabulous idea to use the train station, right? That was, the biggest hit of the holiday season. And, this community, someone mentioned they were from the East Coast. Well, on the East Coast, there are literary festivals and all of those small communities that drive much traffic. There's signature events. And I think, as a library, we have our niche, and Gorton has its niche, and Ellowa Farm has its niche. And sometimes we cross over, but it's all crossing over in complementary ways. We hosted a book discussion with Ellowa Farms about urban farming, right? So it's a book about urban farming. So we have the copies of the books, and we host the book discussion, and we host it at Ellowa Farm. So it's about us helping each other all get better, rather than talking about competition. Sorry, that's my soapbox. Sorry.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'll catch us up on the chat. David Rose, I love the expertise and friendliness of the library staff. Please do not change this when you update the library. And from Rami Lopat, personally, the library.
Victor?
Personally, yes.
This is Rami. Don't read my chat because it will make no sense. I hit the return bar, the space bar, and it posted it. So there's two separate thoughts going on. Just cancel. But I will point, what I was posting makes my point. The screw up makes my point. Is that the library hits all the cylinders for me. I don't think I've ever been disappointed. I think it's managed fantastically. The choices are immense. The only thing that I suffer from is that I can never get too much teaching of tech, how to do these apps. And so you just saw, I don't know how to do them. And I could actually imagine that tech could even be a separate building, maybe a little one on site, maybe the replacement for one of those wings, a 1,200 square foot center, or it could be totally offsite on the hospital campus or at the West High School. I think it could be a standalone entity. And like Catherine said, without competition. The high school has an amazing technology center. Lake Forest College, I've been there. I've hired people from the students to come over and work for my business. So tech is the only thing. And then secondly, I would say that the other day on one of these forums, we talked about the library developing a regional expertise, a regional repository for something. It used to be gardening. And I thought about that in the last couple of days. And I thought, you know, gardening is still a really good thing here. We have 4 garden clubs, but also we have land conservation. We have one of the most stellar land conservation organizations in the country with Lake Forest Open Lands. But we don't necessarily have a center for all the learning and all the books that teach us about restoration and conservation. And of course, we have architectural history. That's what we're here arguing about. So, so I don't know whether we could develop that kind of expertise and a room like we once had the garden room in the library. It would be really nice to bring that back, and it's murals too. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Romney.
Thank you, Rami. And you also included a question about parking on the lawn. Would you like us to read that and respond to it?
Well, as you know, I'm you know, the maven of site planning. I don't think we've done half enough site planning on this process. And I'm really concerned that the building envelope is getting so big that we can't park in the rear of the library, and the parking seems to be moving to the front lawn. So I would like, you don't have to answer it now, but I would certainly like that to be a much bigger focus of the planning process, not just the building, but the site. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It certainly will be. It is worth sharing a couple of general responses to that comment. It's worth saying that no site exploration to date proposes parking on the lawn per se. And let me share a little bit about the detail that's being referred to here. Currently, at the west side of the library, there are, I believe, 3, maybe 4 parallel parking places, and tucked into an alcove to the side of the library is where the current handicap places are. What that means is it means that a person with a disability, with a wheelchair, need to park in those spaces, exit, navigate their way through the drive aisle where there may be traffic up to the library door. So while nothing is final on the site plan, what has been explored is to take those 4 parallel parking places, turn them perpendicular, and make those the handicapped accessible spaces so that a person with a disability can exit their car, be they in a wheelchair or elderly with a walker, go directly onto a sidewalk that is flat and low slope with easy and safe access to the front door. So there is not parking proposed on the lawn, but a relocation and 2 extra stalls serving folks with disabilities or mobility problems to give them a welcoming access to the front door. And it would be important to characterize it that way rather than parking on the lawn. So thank you for that.
3 goes to 6.
You know, Rami, I'd have to look at the drawing exactly. I can bring that up and get a response back to you. I just don't know the quantity. So let me take a look and provide a response through the library, if I may.
Currently, the library has only 2 official handicap parking spaces on the west side. The 2 in the drive aisle on the slope are not official. So I think we're looking at 2. I think I saw 8, but we'll get you the correct answer, Romney.
Thank you. Well, 8 is a lot. Wait a minute. Okay.
Other questions and comments? Good discussion. Others that want to weigh in, please.
Victor, at the end, could you describe what you mean by the focus tomorrow night being historic preservation? Because we've all been talking about that already.
Yes, as long as there aren't comments flowing forth, let me answer that question right away, Romney. We have scheduled a dedicated listening session like this for the Preservation Foundation and members of the HPC. We have not had a dialogue directly with those folks since the advisory committee that was put together by Kathy Cerniak that I mentioned earlier. And so during this new series about a 6-week period of listening sessions, we wanted to make sure that one was devoted specifically to that topic. You know, frankly, we want to double back with the preservation group and representatives to assure, as we are doing with all groups, that nothing has been designed. And we took their message in the conversations we had last time that neither of the options they saw would meet with compliance and recommendation from the HPC to City Council. So we want to double back to that message, ask their advice on how we can move forward, letting the community know that there is not a design that is being pushed on the table, that process will begin. And we just wanted to create a forum that's entirely focused on the topic of historic preservation and the architecture of the building. And that's tomorrow evening.
Did you
Does
say
that answer the question?
Well, I'm not sure. HPC members are expected to come?
Romney, no, there was a cross in terms, HPC only can only consider the project when it comes to them. So members of the HPC, this will not be in attendance as members of the HPC.
Sorry, Catherine, I misspoke about that one. I was still thinking
No,
about
that's
the
all right.
advisory committee. Thank you.
We have so many historic preservation crossovers. So I just want to make sure we're very clearly stating that we are respecting city processes, and HPC considers projects when they come before that entity in the sanctity of their meeting schedule.
I signed up.
Are you also contemplating sessions just with teenagers or with families with small children or friends of the library? How does this break up?
We did one session with the Friends of the Library earlier today, but all sessions were open. We just felt that with the passion around historic preservation, we wanted to make sure that individuals who perhaps don't have that passion had a chance to have a voice. The presentation is very similar for tomorrow night. The idea is that it may go deeper into preservation, but we're still trying to understand what people want this library to do and be and provide. And that's really our goal with these sessions.
A couple of new comments have come through the chat. Natalie says, I agree with Rami. The library has pretty much everything I need. Maybe technology help, but I don't know what form that would take. And from Chusri, with this site, is there enough room for emergency vehicle to come through with the addition now that the road behind the library is closed off? as we've been exploring the site, our civil engineering team has done a turning analysis to verify that emergency vehicles up to a certain size can circumnavigate the library. Of course, this isn't a hook and ladder fire truck, but that would not be possible now. The widths and turning radius available on a new perimeter drive would match, or in many cases improve, what is available now. So emergency vehicles circumnavigating the building has been a consideration that we're tracking. Catherine, I'll defer to you on this question, but should we begin a going once, going twice countdown for feedback? I want to make sure everybody who would like to has a chance to share their thoughts, share their voice. We've got another 20 minutes left in our forum for anybody who would like to continue to share, but I'm not hearing a lot more comments coming forward or in the chat.
Maybe I'll do my little end story reminders, and then we'll do one more call for comments. So just remind everyone, there's lots of textual information on the website about plans for improvement. Feel free to contact the library board if you have questions. Feel free to call me, contact me if you want a tour. We've been having tours this week, and it's amazing what people say when they leave the building, because they putting everything in context is really an incredible feeling to understand how the library functions in the building. So happy to do that. And then you can go on the website, you can send us comments and request updates as they come out, and then watch for the community survey. The survey will be coming out very shortly because we have a pretty short window. If you watched us at City Council, the mayor said, want a short leash on this, I'd like to see you back in 60 days. So whether it's 60 or 75, but we're moving quickly to go back with a range of options for City Council.
Okay, have any other thoughts, questions, or comments come to mind? Sarah is raising her hand. Go ahead, please, Sarah.
Hi, I just have a question. Earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that usage of the library would increase by 30% with a new, more appropriate facility. I was wondering what the percentage is of adults in Lake Forest that check out books from our library currently.
Catherine, do you happen to know that?
I don't have the statistic in that metric. We know that we I believe have 11,000 library cards issued. So against a population of 19,000, we know that there's 30% more card holders that live on the east side of town than on the west side of town. So I have that metric like that, but Sarah, if you want to shoot me an email, I can maybe look at it in a different way that gets it closer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
And Heather has her hand up. Heather, you were next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I guess I am wondering about how the survey is going to be written, because sometimes the way the survey is written, you get better information back. So will we be able to answer, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, being 1 being very important to you, 0 being not important, so that we can kind of start to evaluate trade-offs if, when we talk about the EVOP pricing and that kind of thing, just to have a really good content of the survey, because I think the library is twofold, that it's very important, the content and the mission and what goes on in the library. But the second flip side is that it is accessible to all ages and free to walk in. And so when we're talking about different services, is it important because it's important to the mission of the library, or is it important because it's free? Because if it's not important that it's integral to what we as Lake Foresters believe as the library should do or be, but we want it at the library because the library is the free spot. You understand what you get what I'm saying? That,
Yes.
that I just want to make sure that the survey questions, and maybe something would be, here's what the survey questions are going to be. Community, do you have input? Are we asking the right things? Maybe somebody has something that they would like to ask. I don't know, but I just want to make sure that we get the most and the best information from as many of the 18,000 people that will fill it out.
Absolutely. That the way you're talking about it being structured is that way we have someone on staff that has expertise in survey work as part of his doctoral program. So I think our goal is to find out what the community wants and how it's going to evaluate its trade-offs.
Patricia has her hand up. Patricia, go ahead. Oh, Patricia, you're muted. Unmute, please. Nick, are you able to help and unmute Patricia's? There we go. Thank you.
Request.
Why not have a couple of open houses with docents? And at the end, the exit, have exit polls with not yes and no answers, or have answers from the heart, not Xerox answers, yes and no, or I agree or disagree, and see what the people feel is important. Now, I feel architecture is the most important thing, and you can fit in your technology accordingly. But other people probably don't feel that way. I think Romney has hit the button. Everything she says is really on target. But I think open houses might do the trick. And you'd have docents explaining to people what's going on. Personally, lots of people like it the way it is, interior wise. And they love the foyer. They love the foyer. They do not like the fact that the card catalog is gone. Technology isn't for everyone, you know. And maybe it is for the young people, but for the bolsters, the card catalog was really good. Anyway, that's just a lasting opinion on my part. Because everyone loves the library. We don't see it as, we don't want it to be the modernization. We don't want it to be a detriment to the community. So far, we don't see that it's going to be an improvement on the exterior, maybe on the interior, but not on the exterior. And the exterior is so important. And I don't know if the architects and the library board realize that. I hope they, after this meeting or tomorrow's meeting, they understand that the architecture is really an integral part of the expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. We're certainly being sensitive to that. So thank you for amplifying that. I see Sarah's hand up. Sarah, would you like to share?
Oh, no, that, Sorry, that was an error. Sorry.
That's okay. Any other comments, questions? Anybody?
Victor, I'd like to say one last thing to you. I had,
Participatory, sorry.
Victor, this is Rami. I tip my
Yes,
hat.
go ahead, Rami.
I tip my, sorry, I tip my hat off to you in some respects, Victor, because I think the city has done a disservice to you as an architect. We have hemmed in this library on its north side to a degree that makes even construction staging impossible. There is a condo north of the library now, condo number 2, that was expanded and now looms over the library and sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Nearby is city-owned land that was not reserved all this time for an ounce of expansion room. In fact, the parking has disappeared on the rear of the library because of the library's expansion colliding with a 2 to 3 story condo to its north. And now they're just separated by maybe, I'm guessing 70 feet. It's a little bit of open space, we're told, public open space, but to me, it's a dog run, Victor, and not a pleasant space for anyone. And once you get onto the second floor of a brand spanking new children's section, what do we look at? We look at the back of a condo building. Even Ms. Lemmer a few years ago said that would not be a service to the library to look at the back of a condo building. At that time, the library, she said, was unsightly at the rear. We completely agree. But you know, we talk about moving the sculptures and restoring the front lawn. Well, wouldn't it have been really great to have those sculptures moved to a sculpture park on that little 1/4 acre of land to the north? But we didn't give that to the library. It just seems unconscionable to me. I know the city council had bigger ideas about fiduciary responsibility, but I think site planning really needed to be done and the library needed to have first dibs, just like the plan commission said once upon a time. So thanks. I think it's a hard job you have, and I give you a lot of credit. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I just want to share that 2 things. Yes, it's a very constrained site, so it does pose challenges. We like those challenges. Not sure today what the outcome will be, but our design team's agenda is only one faceted. We just want to be a good steward of the combined vision of the library in service to what the city expects from the site. And so there certainly are the challenges you mentioned. We're going to do our best to find innovative solutions and be a good steward for the library programs, as well as the city and citizens' expectations for the architecture. So thank you for those comments. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you everyone so much for coming. You know how to reach us if you have more questions or comments, and we have one more session tomorrow night. And for those of us that are planning to join us again, we'll look forward to seeing you then. So take care and have a great night, everyone.